Now, what is that huge mottled in this corner here? He's down the bottom.
Ah, that is one of the beauty moths.
Oh, and it is. Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
They're often quite large, and they'll have all of their wings stretched out so you can see all four at the same time.
Okay.
Ah, and this is one of the moths we were referring to earlier that doesn't have a proboscis. So this is a common swift moth, and they are always at the front of the moth books because they evolved first before all of the other types of bigger moths, and we know that because they don't have the tongue, they don't have a proboscis, so they'll just...
Oh, it's so furry.
They don't need to feed on nectar at all.
Right.
And they're called swift moths because when we switch this moth trap on, when we go to sleep, these are always among the first moth species that will arrive at the moth trap. So they're very swift to emerge. They fly early in the evening, and they won't turn up late when you get to 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. They'll have already finished flying by then. So different moths fly at different times during the night.
Right.
And they segment up the night between them sometimes, so different species will choose to emerge at a particular time in the night, and that just makes it easier for them to find each other if they're all trying to fly at the same time of night.
Oh, he's very handsome. Okay, well,
Very short antennae as well.
so it's a little girl.
Yeah, so
And-
males and females of some moths do have different patterns on them. And with this one, normally the female's a little bit plainer and the male will have more white patterns on his wings.
Oh, she's still very pretty. Thank you. And off she toddles.
Ah, and here's a male.
Oh,
So maybe they found each other during the night.
maybe they did. Where will she lay her eggs?
Swift moths normally will just feed on grass.
All right.
But underground on the root of the grass, so you never see them.
Right.
As a caterpillar, you'd only see the adults, and you can see the male down here. We move some of that grass out of the way. He's got a lot more patterning going on. A lot of white patterning compared to that female we just had.
Yeah.
But they rest in a similar way. You can tell they're the same species, just a different pattern.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that quite clearly. Very pretty. Oh, there he is.
And when they warm up a little bit, they'll be able to fly off.
Oh, you're warming up, you're warming up.
Yeah, so some moths need to vibrate their wing muscles for a minute or a few minutes if you get a bigger moth before they're warm enough to take flight, or we say have controlled flight, because sometimes a moth from the moth trap will try to flutter a little bit before it's quite warmed up enough, and he doesn't have controlled flight yet, and they'll just glide and then flop a little bit
Right, okay,
away.
okay. Oh, it's beautiful. Okay, what's next?
And he's off. Oh, I think there's another swift moth. The swift moth's had a good night.
Okay.
So there's another two there. Oh,
There's another
three.
three.
Wow.
So we've had another 3 swift moths. And that they're all living on the grass, aren't they? under the grass.
Yeah, the root
Right.
of the grass.
So this pasture is really important, and it's important that we leave it as just the
Yeah.
grass.
So if the soil isn't disturbed, then you can get these moths feeding on the roots.
Right.
If an area is cultivated a lot and the soil keeps being turned over, then you probably wouldn't get as many of them.
No, and they won't be able to survive. So that's wonderful news for the pasture here. Okay, nothing underneath. That's great. Next egg box. Oh, it's another one. There's another
swift
two. Another two. Okay. We have swift moths. I think it's safe to say
There's
Valley
one
View
underneath as well.
has swift moths, and we've got a little chap hiding underneath as well. There he is. Right. Well, I don't think we have any population problems with that particular species, which is wonderful news. And another egg box coming out. And what have we got here?
So this little moth here is called a heart and dart. So that's referring to the pattern that's on the wings, and I can tell it's that species because he's got a little arrow on his face if you see him from the front. So sometimes when people are trying to identify moths, it's really useful to not only get a picture of the moth you're trying to identify from the top, it can be quite nice to have a picture of it from the face side as well. Some of them have quite defining features like that arrow around the face.
Oh, that is really good.
So you can see him vibrating his wing muscles now.
So he's getting ready to go.
Yeah, so these guys, compared to those geometrid moths that were quite butterfly-like and flappy, these ones take a little bit of time to warm up in the morning. They're a type of noctuid moth, so different from those geometrids. It looks quite different. You can only see two of its wings at a time, and they're built for speed and powerful flight. So these guys are more likely to be migratory moths than the geometrids are. They can fly all the way over the channel, and you can get species that would have been caterpillars feeding in France, crossing overnight and turning up at moth traps in Kent.
Wow. And it's not that we've got anything against migratory moths, it's just a way of identifying that they travel. It's not that migratory moths are good or migratory moths are bad, they are just moths. We love them all.
Yes.
We need them all.
So the hummingbird hawk moth that people might be very familiar with,
Yes.
almost always a migrant.
Yes.
So they've all come across from mainland Europe when they turn up in our gardens, feeding on a lot of times Buddleia or Verbena bonariensis.
Yes.
And really what they need to encourage them to not only be a migrant, to breed here as well, is ladies' bedstraw plants. So that's what their caterpillars feed on.
Right.
So if you find some seeds for ladies' bedstraw and put them in your garden, that's the only way that your garden's going to support a breeding population of hummingbird hawk moths, rather than the adult that stops off in your garden for a little bit of nectar to refuel and then goes somewhere else to actually find suitable breeding habitat for their caterpillars.
Exactly, and this is what I'm always saying to gardeners about Buddleias. By having Buddleias, you will only have butterflies feeding. You're not feeding the caterpillars. So they're just visitors.
Yes.
You need what the caterpillars feed on. so that they become adults, so that you can see the beautiful adults.
Yeah.
There he is. I've
So
got a fantastic picture there.
Willow beauties are some of the largest of the geometrid moths. So you know it's that one because you can see all 4 of the wings.
Yeah.
Rests very flat, and each wing is fairly triangular in shape, whereas butterflies normally, if you were to draw around their wings, they're normally more oval shaped and rounded.
It's wonderful.
Another swift moth.
Oh, what a surprise! Are we going to start taking bets on how many swift moths we've got?
You're going to get so many you're going to lose count.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Spider.
We've got a beautiful spider on the other side, Rebecca. Oh, it's dropped down. It's dropped down. Lovely. Look, there she is. There she is on there.
So the spider isn't attracted to light as such, but if it can get a free meal.
Ah, so an opportunist.
Yeah.
People like that. Anything?
Another swift moth.
Oh. What a surprise. There we are. Okay. Another 3 swift moths.
So you do have a different one in here.
Oh,
So this is another one of those
Oh,
geometrids.
you can hardly see it. How
So
can I?
you didn't initially see that one, so very well camouflaged against an egg box. Not what it's going for in nature.
Right, so I don't know if you can pick up on this, and that's better. No, too much. So can you see that it's grey? Would you call that grey? I mean, it's virtually
very pale.
invisible. It's very pale. That's beautiful. What is that? Okay, so we're going to, that's lovely, Rebecca. We're going to explain the Kent Moth Group. So what is this?
So this is quite a new website. It only came online last year, the new redesigned kentmoths.org. And if you know nothing about moths, this is your #1 starting point. So there's a page called Flying Tonight. It will change throughout the year. So at the moment it knows we're in the middle of June. And if I tell it I'm in East Kent, which is Vice County 15, and I'm looking for a large moth, so a macro moth, it'll immediately filter which moths I'm most likely to see, which has worked quite well for us today because we had a heart and dart moth, and we
Endless
had an
common
awful lot of common swift moths.
Yeah.
So this is your best starting point if you're doing a moth trap in a garden setting. And you can essentially just match the picture to the moth that you've seen. So there's the
How
willow
lovely.
beauty that we had,
Oh yes.
but the cream spot tiger might not be on there because that's a little bit less common than these other ones here. And we had a treble lines as well, but it flew away very early on.
Oh,
And
that's
if you
wonderful.
get very lucky, a little bit later in June, you might get an elephant hawk moth in your garden as well.
Oh, I remember one year having elephant hawk moths. Believe it or not, Rebecca, on dahlias. They were all over the dahlias.
As a caterpillar.
No, I found adults. I don't know, I mean, would they feed on a dahlia? All my
So,
dahlias are single, obviously.
in the wild, they would be feeding on willow herbs, so bright pink flowers. So you might think, why is a moth bright pink if it's trying to camouflage? They often feed on plants that have those
Colours. And thinking about it, that was in an area of the old garden where that tall pink willow herb used to flower, and I used to let it. So maybe that's it.
So it's on the front of the book as well, on a honeysuckle, because sometimes they'll use that for nectar as an adult. But it's probably the most common of the hawk moths. The book says it's all over, and even though in the wild they started off feeding on the willow herbs, they'll also switch in a garden setting to feeding on fuchsias.
Oh.
And they get their name elephant hawk moth because you can see the front of the caterpillar looks a little bit like an eye with an extendable trunk, and it can wave around to try and confuse something.
And they're very
that
big
wants to eat
caterpillars,
it.
aren't they?
They are
They are
very big as well.
Very large.
So if it's an adult now as a moth, then it'll be a caterpillar later in the summer. You'll see these guys feeding.
Brilliant. Right, should we get back to our egg boxes? We've only got 3 left. That's the first one.
Got some ants.
We've got some ants. And that's the second one.
Oh, you've got a very big moth hiding in there.
Oh.
So this is another noctuid moth, because you can only see 2 of its wings at a time.
Yeah, I can't
If we just squeeze the tip of the egg box, we can encourage him to come out a little bit further so we can see him.
Come on, chap. We want to see you. Oh, wow.
And this is a large yellow underwing moth. I can tell it's that because he's got a little black marking near the tip of his wing that the other underwing moths don't have. And also just size. This is a large moth. It's about the size of half of my thumb.
Can't quite. That's better.
But when they're resting like this, they're just brown, so quite well camouflaged. You wouldn't see them so well. But if they get disturbed by something that could potentially eat them, then they can flash their bright yellow hind wings, which look like that.
Wow, that is bright.
And there's a whole group of yellow underwing moths.
And it's not what you'd expect from this chap. He looks dull
he looks
and
quite
uninteresting. Yeah.
But when he warms up and as he flies off, he'll look quite yellow and colourful.
And then we'd probably think he was a butterfly.
Yes, but those guys, really important for bats.
Bats?
Yes, I was speaking to someone from Kent Bat Group last weekend who
Yeah.
said that underneath the roosts where they find some of the rare bats that they're looking for, you see lots of wings of large yellow underwings all over the floor where the bats have been munching on the large yellow underwings, and
so yeah,
the
they're
wings have dropped.
very important food source.
Yeah. So.
Right, we're on our last final egg box, which is empty. So incredibly informative. Right, so I hope as gardeners we can all appreciate moths and begin to think about them in a different light. They are important. Everything is completely connected. It either feeds on something that's connected to something else that eats that something. You know, just look around you, appreciate the moths. You won't notice them, as you've seen from today. A lot of them, they're not purple, they're not brilliant colours, but they are vital. Thanks everybody. Take care. Bye bye.